The message came through the Deep Space Communication Array at exactly 14:32, Earth Standard Time. Ambassador Lisa Martinez was reviewing supply reports in her office aboard the UES Liberty when the urgent alert flashed across her screen. The red priority code meant only one thing: emergency contact from their allies in the Kepler Federation. Lisa quickly made her way to the secure briefing room. Captain Jake Thompson was already there, along with his senior staff. The room felt tense as they waited for the transmission to connect. The Kepler Federation had been humanity's first friend among the stars. They were peaceful traders who valued talking over fighting. If they were sending an emergency message, something was very wrong. The holographic projector hummed to life, and the tall figure of Chancellor Vextar appeared before them. The blue-skinned alien looked worried. His usually calm face showed clear signs of fear. In all her years working with the Kepler Federation, Lisa had never seen their leader look so troubled. "Friends of Earth," Vextar began, his voice heavy with concern, "I bring you a warning that may save your species. NIGMA Empire has been detected moving toward your sector of space." Captain Thompson leaned forward in his chair. "The NIGMA Empire? We've never heard of them." "That is because they leave no survivors to tell their story," Vextar replied grimly. "We have sent similar warnings to 17 different species over the past 100 years. None of them listened to our advice. None of them survived their first meeting with NIGMA forces." Commander Amy Rodriguez, the ship's weapons officer, felt her stomach drop. "What exactly are we dealing with here?" Vextar image flickered slightly as he accessed his data files. "The NIGMA Empire is built on one simple belief, that any species capable of traveling between stars, but lacking their specific technology, is a mistake that must be fixed. They have destroyed the homeworlds of 43 different species in the past 200 years. The briefing room fell completely silent. Lieutenant Paul Jackson, who handled communications, was the first to speak. "What do they want from us?" "Nothing that you would be willing to give," Vextar answered. "They do not trade. They do not negotiate. They do not make peace deals. They arrive at your worlds, they study your species, and then they make you an ally, offer, submit to their biological changes, or be destroyed completely." Captain Thompson stood up, his jaw tight with anger. "And if we refuse this offer? Then they return with their full war fleet and turn every human world into glass and ash." "Captain, we have watched species with technology far more advanced than yours fall to the NIGMA Empire. We strongly suggest you begin moving your people away from your outer colonies immediately." Dr. Helen Carter, the ship's chief science officer, quickly pulled up her data pad. "How much time do we have to prepare?" "Our long-range sensors picked up their Herald ship entering your outer system 3 days ago. Based on their usual patterns of behavior, you have perhaps 2 weeks before they reach your core worlds around Earth." The transmission quality began to fade as Vextar prepared to end the call. "There is one more thing you must know. The NIGMA Empire sends only one ship at first, a Herald ship. This vessel will make contact and deliver their ultimatum. Do not be fooled by the fact that they send only one ship. That single vessel has enough firepower to destroy your entire space fleet." Lisa Martinez felt her hands shaking as she asked the question everyone was thinking. "Have any species ever successfully fought them off?" Vextar's expression became even more grim. "In 200 years of expansion, the NIGMA Empire has never been defeated, never been stopped, never even been seriously damaged. They are efficient, ruthless, and completely without mercy. The only species that have survived contact with them are the ones who accepted their biological modifications. And those survivors are no longer truly the same species they once were." "What happens to the ones who accept?" Dr. Carter asked. "They become slaves. Their bodies are changed with NIGMA technology. Their minds are altered to remove creativity and independent thought. They work in NIGMA mining operations until they die, usually within 50 years. The NIGMA consider this a generous offer. The holographic image began to fade as the transmission reached its limit. We are sending you all the data we have collected about NIGMA ships, weapons, and tactics. Study it well. And remember, every species that has tried to fight them believed they could win. Every species was wrong. The transmission ended, leaving the humans alone with their fear and the weight of the warning they had just received. Captain Thompson immediately began issuing orders. Paul, get me a direct line to Earth Command. Priority Alpha. Amy, I want a full analysis of our defensive capabilities within the hour. Helen, start going through that Kepler data and tell me everything you can learn about these NIGMA ships. As the senior staff rushed to their tasks, Lisa Martinez remained in her chair, staring at the spot where Vexstar's image had been. She had spent her career building relationships between species, finding common ground, making peace. The idea of an enemy that simply could not be reasoned with was terrifying. Commander Rodriguez returned to the briefing room an hour later with her preliminary report. Captain, I've run the numbers on our fleet strength versus what the Kepler data shows for a typical NIGMA Herald ship. The results are not encouraging. Give it to me straight, Amy. Sir, their single Herald ship has more firepower than our entire Soul Defense fleet combined. Their shields can absorb more damage than we can dish out. Their weapons can destroy our largest ships with single shots. And according to this data, they've never lost a Herald ship in 200 years of conquests. Dr. Carter looked up from her analysis station. It gets worse. The biological modifications they perform on conquered species are not improvements. They're designed to create perfect slaves. They remove the parts of the brain that handle creativity, independent thought, and emotional response. The modified beings can work and follow orders, but they can't think for themselves anymore. Lieutenant Jackson's communication board lit up with incoming messages from Earth. Sir, Earth Command is requesting an immediate full briefing. They're also asking if we believe the Kepler Federation warning is genuine. Tell them yes, Captain Thompson replied without hesitation. The Kepler Federation has never lied to us. If they say this NIGMA Empire is coming, then we need to prepare for the worst. Lisa Martinez finally stood up from her chair. Captain, I need to contact all the other human colonies and stations. If we only have 2 weeks, we need to start evacuation procedures immediately. Agreed. But Lisa, we also need to start thinking about something else. What's that? Captain Thompson looked out the briefing room window at the stars beyond. We need to decide if we're going to run or fight. Because from what I'm hearing, running might not be enough. These NIGMA forces have ships that can travel between stars just as fast as ours can. If they want to hunt us down, they'll find us. Eventually, Commander Rodriguez nodded grimly. The captain's right. Even if we evacuate all our colonies, they'll just follow us wherever we go. We might buy ourselves some time, but we can't hide forever. Dr. Carter closed her datapad and looked at her colleagues. Then we need to start preparing for a war we can't win against an enemy we can't negotiate with. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Outside the windows, the stars that had once seemed full of promise and adventure now looked cold and threatening. Somewhere out there, the NIGMA Empire was coming for humanity. And according to their only allies in the galaxy, no species had ever survived what was about to happen. The Herald ship appeared out of hyperspace like a nightmare made real. Admiral Pete Harrison watched from the bridge of the UES Washington as the massive alien vessel took position just beyond Mars' orbit. The ship was enormous, nearly 12 Kilometers long and built like a weapon, designed by someone who had never heard of beauty. The hull was black as space itself, covered in sharp angles and weapon ports that seemed to watch the human fleet like hungry eyes. Energy readings from the ship made their most advanced sensors struggle to get clear information. Whatever technology powered that vessel was far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. "Sir, we're getting readings from every sensor station in the system," reported Lieutenant Kate Morgan from her communication post. "This thing just appeared out of nowhere, and it's bigger than our largest space station." Admiral Harrison had commanded the Sole Defense Fleet for 8 years. He had fought pirates, handled first contact situations, and managed conflicts between human colonies. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for this moment. The ship floating before them represented technology that made humanity look like children playing with toys. All ships maintain defensive positions, but do not take any hostile actions, he ordered. "We need to see what they want before we do anything that might start a war we can't win." The waiting lasted exactly 17 minutes. Then every communication system in the human fleet activated at once, filled with a signal so powerful that it overrode their security systems and forced itself onto every screen in the Sol system. Being that appeared on their displays was a thing from humanity's worst nightmares. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, its body a horrible mixture of flesh and machine parts. 6 arms extended from its torso, each one ending in sharp metal claws that looked designed for cutting and tearing. Its head was stretched out like a snake's, with multiple glowing blue eyes that seemed to look through the camera directly at each person watching. "I am Harold Prime Zexthul of the NIGMA Empire," the creature announced in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. "Your species has been evaluated and found to be genetically inferior. You will submit to immediate biological enhancement or face complete extinction." Admiral Harrison stepped forward, making sure his uniform looked perfect and his bearing showed military discipline. He had no idea if this creature understood human body language, but he wanted to project strength and confidence. "I am Admiral Pete Harrison of the United Earth Space Command. We decline your offer and demand that you leave our system immediately." The alien's expression did not change, but somehow its presence became more threatening. The multiple eyes focused on Harrison with what might have been amusement. "You misunderstand, primitive creature. This was not an offer or a request. This was a statement of the only path available for your survival. You have 72 of your time periods to gather your leadership for the enhancement process." Dr. Susan Wright, the fleet's expert on alien biology, leaned forward from her station. She had studied every piece of data the Kepler Federation had provided about the NIGMA Empire, but seeing one of them in person was far more disturbing than any report could have prepared her for. "What exactly does this enhancement process involve?" "Your weak organic forms will be improved with superior NIGMA biotechnology. Your inefficient neural pathways will be streamlined for better performance. Your chaotic emotional responses will be eliminated entirely. You will become useful." Commander Rick Foster, Harrison's second-in-command, could not help but ask the obvious question. "Useful for what purpose?" "Labor in our mining operations, resource extraction from conquered worlds, cannon fodder for our expansion efforts against other inferior species. The enhanced rarely survive more than 50 of your years, but they serve their purpose with perfect efficiency during that time." Admiral Harrison felt his anger rising, but kept his voice calm and professional. "That's not enhancement. That's slavery and murder. Our answer remains no." Harold Prime Zexthul's multiple eyes seemed to gleam with something that might have been entertainment. 37 species have given us that exact same response. Their worlds are now mining colonies, staffed by the few survivors we found. Worthy of enhancement. You have 72 hours to reconsider. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the bridge of the Washington in shocked silence. Admiral Harrison looked around at his staff and saw his own thoughts reflected in their faces. They were facing an enemy that viewed genocide as a business transaction. Lieutenant, Morgan's hands shook as she worked her communication controls. Sir, I'm getting reports from every human colony and station in the system. That transmission went to everyone, military and civilian. What's the response from Earth Command? President Davis is calling an emergency session of the World Council. All military commanders are ordered to begin immediate evacuation of non-essential personnel from outer system installations. Commander Foster pulled up tactical displays showing the Herald ship's position. Admiral, that ship hasn't moved since it arrived. It's just sitting there, waiting. Dr. Wright was studying her readings of the alien vessel. It's scanning everything in the system. Every ship, every station, every inhabited world. The energy output from those sensors is incredible. They're getting detailed information about our technology, our population, our defensive capabilities. Can we block their scans? Not with any technology we have. Sir, based on the data the Kepler Federation provided, this is standard NIGMA procedure. They spend the waiting period studying their target, learning everything they need to know for either the enhancement process or the extermination. Admiral Harrison turned to his tactical officer. What are our options if they decide to attack? The young officer, Lieutenant Carl Brooks, had run every simulation he could think of during the past 2 weeks. Sir, based on our analysis of their ship's capabilities, we have no options. That single vessel has enough firepower to destroy our entire fleet. Its shields can absorb more damage than we can produce. Our weapons would be like throwing rocks at a tank. There has to be something we can do. Dr. Wright looked up from her scientific analysis. Admiral, there might be. I've been studying the NIGMA enhancement process, and I think I understand something important about how they think. Explain. The biological modifications they perform don't just change the body, they completely restructure the brain. They remove the parts that handle creativity, independent thought, and tactical innovation. Every NIGMA we've seen in the Kepler Federation data appears to be enhanced this way. Commander Foster frowned. What does that mean for us? It means they might be very good at using superior technology, but they probably can't adapt to unexpected situations. They've conquered 37 species using the same methods every time because those methods always worked. They might not know how to handle something completely different. Admiral Harrison considered this information. It was not much to build hope on, but it was better than nothing. What kind of something different? I don't know yet. But every species they've conquered developed space travel through peaceful exploration. None of them had any real military tradition. We're different. We've been fighting wars for thousands of years. We understand tactics and strategy in ways that peaceful species never needed to learn. Lieutenant Morgan's communication board lit up with an incoming message. Sir, priority transmission from Earth Command. President Linda Davis appeared on the main screen, speaking from the Secure Command Center beneath the old United Nations building. Admiral Harrison, I've been briefed on the situation. The World Council has voted unanimously. We will not submit to this NIGMA enhancement process. We would rather die as humans than live as slaves. Understood, Madam President? What are your orders? Prepare for war, Admiral. I know the odds are against us, but we're going to fight. We're also beginning immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel from the outer system. Military families, researchers, anyone who doesn't need to be here. And the essential personnel? President Davis's expression was grim but determined. Anyone who chooses to stay and fight. We're not ordering anyone to die for this cause, but we won't abandon our home without a fight. As the transmission ended, Admiral Harrison looked around his bridge. These men and women had signed up to defend humanity among the stars. Now they were facing an enemy that had never been defeated, using technology that made their weapons look like antiques. "All right, people," he said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "We have 69 hours to figure out how to do something that 37 other species couldn't manage. We need to find a way to defeat an enemy that has never lost a battle." Commander Foster nodded grimly. "Where do we start, sir?" Admiral Harrison looked out at the massive alien ship hanging in space like a promise of death. "We start by remembering that we're human, and humans have never been very good at following the rules that other people set for us." Harold Prime Zexthal stood in the command center of his massive ship, reviewing the data his scanners had collected about humanity during the past 60 hours. The information was displayed on holographic screens that surrounded him, showing detailed analysis of human technology, population centers, and military capabilities. The results were exactly what he had expected. Another primitive species that would require minimal effort to conquer. Science Prime Colvex, he called to his chief analyst, a being whose original form had been so thoroughly modified by NIGMA enhancements that she was more machine than flesh. "Present your findings on this human species." Colvex activated her own display screens, her 6 mechanical arms moving with perfect precision as she manipulated the data. "The species show some interesting characteristics. Herald Prime. Their rate of technological advancement is impressive for such a young, space-traveling race. However, their military capabilities are laughably inadequate." The screens show detailed scans of human warships. Their largest vessels barely reach 2 kilometers in length, tiny compared to the Herald ship's 12-kilometer bulk. Their weapons were simple plasma-based energy systems that would barely scratch NIGMA battle armor. "Most significantly," Colvex continued, "they appear to have no biological enhancements whatsoever. They are relying entirely on their original, unmodified genetic structure. This explains their limited capabilities." War Prime Nexstar, whose body had been modified for combat with additional weapon systems built into his arms and torso, gestured at the tactical displays. "Their fleet positioning suggests they actually intend to offer resistance. This is amusing. 37 previous species have attempted similar strategies." "And how long did the longest resistance last?" asked Zexthal, though he already knew the answer. 4 hours and 17 minutes. The Velkari had surprisingly advanced shield technology, but it made no difference in the end. Herald Prime Zexthal nodded with satisfaction. The NIGMA Empire had perfected their conquest methods through decades of successful expansion. One Herald ship had always been sufficient for species at this technological level. There was no reason to expect these humans to be any different. What none of the NIGMA commanders understood was that their previous conquests had all shared one crucial characteristic. They had developed spaceflight through gradual, peaceful advancement. Their wars, if they had any, were brief conflicts over resources or territory. None of them had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing their own species. Humanity had reached the stars not through peaceful exploration, but through desperation, competition, and an evolutionary history that had produced the most persistent predators the galaxy had ever seen. Lieutenant Colonel Matt Sullivan sat in the command center of Jupiter Defense Station Alpha, studying tactical displays that showed the NIGMA Herald ship's position. Unlike the alien commanders, he had spent the past 2 weeks studying every piece of human military history he could access, from ancient cavalry charges to the devastating space battles that had nearly destroyed Earth's civilization before unification. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Jenny Walsh, "the alien ship still hasn't moved from its position. It's been sitting there for over 60 hours, just scanning." That's because they think they already know everything they need to know. About us, Sullivan replied. They've done this 37 times before. Same procedure, same results. They probably have a standard checklist they follow. Captain Lavra Bennett's voice came through the communication system from her stealth frigate, the UES Phantom. Matt, are you seeing what I'm seeing in their positioning? Sullivan brought up the tactical overlay that showed the Herald ship's orientation relative to the human fleet. Yeah, I see it. They're positioning themselves like they expect a traditional fleet engagement. No screening vessels, no defensive formations, no attempt to protect their flanks or rear. It's like they think we're going to line up our ships and take turns shooting at each other, Bennett observed. Is that really how space battles work in the rest of the galaxy? Apparently so. According to the Kepler Federation data, most spacefaring species fight very formal, predictable battles. Ships approach each other in neat formations, exchange fire until one side's shields fail, then the losing side surrenders. Lieutenant Walsh looked puzzled. That seems incredibly inefficient. Why would anyone fight that way? Sullivan smiled grimly. Because most species developed space travel through peaceful cooperation. They never needed to learn real tactics. War for them is just a bigger version of the competitions they might have for resources or mates. They have rules, limitations, concepts of honor and fair play. And we don't? We spent 10,000 years trying to kill each other with everything from rocks and sticks to nuclear weapons and biological warfare. We learned to fight dirty because the alternative was extinction. The concept of a fair fight is something we invented after we got tired of almost destroying ourselves. Captain Bennett's voice carried a note of excitement. So you're thinking what I'm thinking? That this NIGMA Herald ship is about to get a very unpleasant education in human military. Doctrine? Yes, I am. Sullivan brought up the tactical planning system and began inputting coordinates for what he privately called Operation Hornet's Nest. It was based on tactics developed during Earth's ancient naval wars, swarm attacks using small, fast vessels, to overwhelm a larger opponent. The plan was simple in concept, but complex in execution. Instead of the traditional fleet engagement the NIGMA Empire expected, the human forces would scatter into small groups and attack from multiple directions simultaneously. Each group would target specific systems on the Herald ship. Weapons, sensors, engines, life support, rather than trying to destroy the vessel outright. Sir, Lieutenant Walsh said as she reviewed the plan, this is going to require perfect timing and coordination. If even one group arrives early or late, the whole thing falls apart. And we better make sure everyone knows their part perfectly. Jenny, I want you to run simulations with every ship commander in the fleet. We're going to practice this until we can do it in our sleep. Admiral Pete Harrison reviewed the same tactical plan from his position on the UES Washington. The strategy was unlike anything in standard military doctrine. But then again, standard military doctrine had never faced an enemy like the NIGMA Empire. Admiral, Commander Rick Foster said, I have to ask, are we really going to base our entire defense on the theory that these aliens don't know how to adapt to unexpected tactics? It's the only advantage we have, Rick. Their technology is superior to ours in every way. Their ships are bigger, faster, and more heavily armed. Their shields can absorb more damage than we can dish out. But according to Dr. Wright's analysis, their biological enhancements remove the parts of their brains that handle creative thinking. Dr. Susan Wright looked up from her analysis station. The pattern is consistent across all the data the Kepler Federation provided. Every NIGM, a conquest followed exactly the same sequence. Arrival, ultimatum, formal battle, victory. They've never had to deviate from their standard procedures, because those procedures have always worked. But what if we're wrong? Foster asked. What if they can adapt? Then we die, Admiral Harrison replied bluntly. But we were going to die anyway if we followed their rules. At least this way, we go down fighting on our own terms. Herald Prime Zexthul checked his chronometer. 12 hours remained before the ultimatum expired. The humans had continued to move their ships around the system, but their formations were still obviously defensive. Their largest vessels remained clustered around their homeworld, exactly as expected. War Prime Nextar. Prepare for standard suppression protocol. When the ultimatum expires, we will demonstrate our superiority by destroying their outer defensive positions. This should convince their leadership to reconsider the enhancement offer. Herald Prime, interrupted Science Prime Colvex. I am detecting some unusual patterns in their ship movements. Several smaller vessels have taken positions that do not match standard defensive doctrine. Zexthul examined the tactical display with mild interest. Some human ships had indeed moved to seemingly random positions throughout the outer system. Explain. Unknown. The positioning appears random and strategically meaningless. Perhaps their commanders are attempting to confuse our targeting systems through unpredictable deployment. A desperate strategy that will prove ineffective. Our targeting systems are far superior to anything these primitives have encountered. Proceed with standard protocol. What Herald Prime Zexthul did not realize was that those randomly positioned ships were exactly where they needed to be for Lieutenant Colonel Sullivan's plan to work. The human commanders had spent the past week studying the Herald ship's weapon placement, sensor arrays, and defensive systems. Every vessel was positioned to attack a specific target at a specific moment. The NIGMA Empire was about to learn that there was a significant difference between conquering peaceful species and fighting a race that had turned warfare into an art form. But first, they would learn something even more important, that underestimating your enemy is the fastest way to lose. A war you thought you had already won. The battle for humanity's survival began at exactly 0347 hours, Seoul Standard Time, when Captain Lavra Bennett fired the first shot of what would become known as the Battle of Seoul. Her stealth frigate, the U.E.C. Phantom, had been hiding in the shadow of a small asteroid for the past 6 hours, waiting for the perfect moment. When the NIGMA ultimatum officially expired, she launched a single nuclear torpedo directly at the Herald ship's massive hull. The weapon detonated against the alien vessel's shields in a brilliant flash of light and radiation. The explosion was completely harmless to the Herald ship, exactly as planned. Sir, the humans have initiated hostilities with a primitive nuclear device, reported Tactical Prime Mordex to Herald Prime Zexthul. Our shields absorbed the impact with minimal energy drain. Damage assessment shows 0% reduction in combat capability. Predictable, Zexthul replied with what might have been amusement. Return fire. Standard suppression pattern. Target their outer defensive positions first. The Herald ship's main weapons activated for the first time in over a year. Massive energy beams, each one capable of vaporizing a human battleship, lanced out toward where the Phantom's torpedo had originated. But the beams struck empty space. The small human vessel had already moved, its superior maneuverability allowing it to dance away from the slower-tracking NIGMA weapons. Target has evaded, Mordex reported, his enhanced reflexes struggling to track the fast-moving human ship. Adjusting fire control systems. What happened next was unlike anything the NIGMA Empire had encountered in 4 decades of conquest. Commander Rick Foster led the first wave of the attack in his heavy cruiser, the U Chicago. But instead of charging directly at the Herald ship, like every other species had done, he angled his approach to look like a retreat vector. As the massive NIGMA weapons swiveled to track him, 43 smaller human vessels emerged from behind Jupiter's moons, their missile tubes already cycling through launch sequences. Multiple small contacts detected. Mordex reported his voice carrying the first hint of concern that any NIGMA had felt in decades. They are using coordinated pack tactics. This does not match any known engagement pattern. Harold Prime Zexthal felt something strange, a sensation his enhanced mind struggled to identify. It might have been confusion. Explain pack tactics. Unknown tactical doctrine. The smaller vessels are moving in coordinated groups, supporting each other's attacks while avoiding direct confrontation with our main weapons. Admiral Pete Harrison watched the battle unfold from his command position. Aboard the UE's Washington, remembering lessons learned from studying Wolf pack behavior and ancient carrier-based naval warfare. Wave 2. Begin your attack run. Wave 3. Prepare for missile saturation protocol. The second wave of human vessels approached from the complete opposite direction, led by Captain Nancy Torres in the destroyer UE's Ranger. As the Herald ships, weapons rotated to engage this new threat. The first wave completed their missile launch, sending over 200 nuclear warheads streaking toward the massive alien vessel. Harold Prime Zexthal watched the incoming missiles on his tactical display and felt that strange sensation growing stronger. His ship's defensive systems were struggling to track and intercept so many small, fast-moving targets approaching from multiple directions simultaneously. Sir, they are targeting our weapons installations specifically, Mordex reported as the first wave of missiles began impacting their shields. Their targeting data suggests detailed analysis of our ship's construction. Impossible. No species has ever achieved that level of tactical sophistication without proper NIGMA enhancement. But Dr. Helen Carter, monitoring the battle from her position aboard the UES Liberty, had spent 2 weeks analyzing every piece of data the Kepler Federation had provided about NIGMA technology. Human military doctrine had always emphasized the importance of knowing your enemy better than they knew themselves. She had identified 17 potential weak points in the Herald ship's design. Direct hit on their primary sensor array, reported Lieutenant Paul Jackson from his communication station. Their targeting efficiency just dropped by 30%. Captain Jake Thompson brought the Liberty in for the third wave of attacks, leading a formation of heavy cruisers in what appeared to be a suicidal frontal assault. The Herald ship concentrated its remaining functional weapons on this obvious threat, pouring massive amounts of energy into the space around the approaching human vessels. But the frontal assault was a deception. While the Herald ship focused on the cruisers, it failed to notice the real danger approaching from its blind spots. Lieutenant Colonel Matt Sullivan had spent the entire battle moving his Jupiter orbital defense platforms into position using minimal thrust and passive sensors. The NIGMA had dismissed these installations as immobile defensive structures, not realizing that human military engineers had designed them to be repositioned when necessary. Now, with the Herald ship completely focused on the fleet action happening, in front of it, Sullivan had 12 fully armed orbital defense stations in perfect firing position at point-blank range from the alien vessel's vulnerable port side. All stations, fire everything we have. The concentrated barrage from 12 military-grade orbital defense platforms struck the Herald ship like the fist of an angry god. Each platform carried weapons designed to destroy incoming asteroids and hostile fleets. Together, they delivered more concentrated firepower than the rest of the human fleet combined dot shields that had never been seriously threatened by 4 decades of conquest. Battles flickered and began to fail under the massive energy assault. For the first time in his enhanced existence, Harold Prime Zexthal felt something his NIGMA conditioning had tried to eliminate, but never quite succeeded in removing completely: fear. Shield generators 3 through 7 are offline. Mordex reported, his voice rising with something that might have been panic. Hull breaches on decks 15 through 23. We are losing atmosphere for multiple sections. How is this possible? Zexthol demanded. These primitives should not have weapons capable of penetrating our defenses. War Prime Nextar. His combat-enhanced body, sparking with electrical damage from system overloads, struggled to access his tactical displays. They are not using superior weapons, Herald Prime. They are using superior tactics. They have concentrated multiple weak attacks on single strong points until our defenses failed. The concept was alien to NIGM understanding. Their previous enemies had always tried to match strength against strength, using their most powerful weapons against the Herald ship's most heavily defended areas. The idea of using many small attacks to overwhelm strong defenses was completely outside their experience. Captain Bennett's voice came over the human communication channels, calm and professional, despite the chaos of battle around her. Sullivan, your platforms did it. Their shields are down on the port side. All units, concentrate fire on the damaged sections. The human fleet, which had been scattered across the solar system in seemingly random positions, suddenly converged on the Herald ship's wounded flank, like sharks sensing blood in the water. Every weapon they had was brought to bear on the areas where the alien vessel's defenses had failed. Herald Prime Zexthol watched his ship's systems failing one by one, as human weapons tore through armor that was supposed to be impenetrable. Science Prime Colvex, explain how this is happening. Colvex's mechanical forms were smoking from overloaded circuits as she tried to process data her enhanced mind was not designed to handle. They are fighting like no species we have ever encountered. Their tactics are not based on honor or fair combat. They are using deception, misdirection, and concentrated attacks on weak points. This does not match any known pattern of civilized warfare. Because we're not civilized, Admiral Harrison said over the open communication channel, his voice carrying across the battlefield to the damaged NIGM-A vessel. We're human, and humans learn to fight by trying to kill each other for 10,000 years. You picked the wrong species to underestimate. The Herald ship, which had entered the Sol system as an unstoppable instrument of conquest, now limped through space with its hull breached, its weapons damaged, and its crew experiencing something they had never felt before, the possibility of defeat. But the battle was not over yet. The Herald ship still had enough firepower left to cause massive damage to the human fleet if its crew could adapt to these unexpected tactics. The question was whether beings whose capacity for creative thinking had been surgically removed could learn new ways of fighting quickly enough to save themselves. For Herald Prime Zexthol, the answer to that question would determine whether the NIGM-A Empire's conquest record remained perfect, or whether they had finally encountered a species that could teach them the true meaning of war. The Herald ship drifted through space like a wounded animal, its black hull cracked and bleeding air from dozens of holes. Herald Prime Zexthol stood in what was left of his command center, looking at screens that showed him something impossible. His ship was dying, and the humans had won. For 40 years, the NIGMA Empire had conquered every species they encountered. For 40 years, no Herald ship had ever been defeated. Now, this small primitive species had done what no one else could do. They had beaten the unbeatable. Sir, Tactical Prime Mordex said, his voice broken by damaged vocal systems. We have lost most of our weapons. Our shields are almost gone. Life support is failing. The humans want us to surrender. Zexthol did not understand the word. In all his enhanced existence, no one had ever asked NIGMA to surrender. They were always the ones making demands. They were always the winners. Admiral Pete Harrison's voice came through their communication systems. An IGMA ship, this is Admiral Harrison. Your vessel is disabled. Your weapons cannot hurt us anymore. Surrender now, and we will treat you fairly. What does fairly mean? Zexthol asked. The concept was strange to him. It means we will not kill you if you stop fighting. It means we will help your wounded and give you food and water. It means we follow rules during war to limit suffering. Zextel's enhanced mind struggled with this idea. The NIGMA way was simple. You won or you died. There were no rules, no mercy, no kindness to enemies. You would not destroy us? We do not want to destroy anyone, but we will defend ourselves. If we must. On Earth, President Linda Davis watched the battle reports in her underground command center. The victory was complete, but she knew this was just the beginning. The Herald ship was only a scout. Somewhere out there, the full NIGMA Empire was waiting. Admiral Harrison, she said over the communication link, what did this battle cost? You? Less than we feared, Madam President. We lost 3 ships and 237 brave people. But we proved something important today. The NIGMA Empire can be beaten. Dr. Susan Wright studied the disabled alien ship from her research vessel. She had been scanning the NIGMA crew members and found something shocking. Admiral, you need to hear this. The NIGMA enhancement process is not just changing their bodies. They have completely rebuilt their brains. They removed the parts that handle creative thinking. This news changed everything. The NIGMA Empire had not conquered 43 species because they were smarter or better at war. They won because they had better technology, and they only fought peaceful species who did not know how to fight real wars. Sir, Commander Amy Rodriguez added, I have been studying their computer files. Every species they conquered developed space travel through peaceful exploration. None of them had military traditions like we do. Admiral Harrison understood what this meant. Humans were different from every other species in the galaxy. They had learned to fight and kill over thousands of years. They knew tactics and strategies that peaceful species had never needed to learn. Madam President, he said to Earth, we need to contact the Kepler Federation immediately. If the NIGMA Empire has been conquering peaceful species for 40 years, they have no idea how to handle what will happen when those species learn to fight like humans do. 6 months later, Harold Prime Zextel sat in a medical facility on Earth's moon. Human doctors were slowly removing his NIGMA enhancements, giving him back abilities that had been taken from his mind decades ago. He was learning to think creatively. Again, to feel emotions, to consider new possibilities. The most interesting thing, he told Dr. Helen Carter during one of their talks, is that you did not defeat us by being more advanced. You defeated us by being more primitive. You kept the ability to make war that most species lose when they reach the stars. Dr. Carter nodded. We almost destroyed ourselves learning to control that ability. We fought terrible wars that killed millions of people. We built weapons that could have ended all life on our world. But we learned something important. The ability to fight and the wisdom to know when not to fight are both necessary. And now you teach these things to other species, to those who want to learn. The Kepler Federation has built the first space military academy. Species all across the galaxy are learning that sometimes, to keep peace, you must be ready for war. Zextel looked out at the busy space traffic around the moon. Ships from dozens of different worlds came and went, all of them now protected by human-trained military forces. What happened to the NIGMA Empire? It collapsed, Dr. Carter said simply. Within 2 years, every species you had conquered broke free using tactics we taught them. She was telling the truth. The NIGMA Empire fell not because humans destroyed it, but because the conquered species learned to fight back. The Velkari, who had been defeated because their honor-based warfare could not adapt to NIGMA tactics, learned about guerrilla fighting and surprise attacks. They freed their home world in 8 months. The Zorathi, peaceful traders who had surrendered without fighting, discovered deception and ambush tactics. Their liberation fleet struck NIGMA bases using strategies that human naval commanders would have been proud of. One by one, every conquered species threw off NIGMA control using human military methods combined with their own unique abilities. A galaxy learned that freedom, once lost, creates a powerful desire for revenge when the chance for liberation comes. But the most important change was not military. It was in how species thought about peace. They learned that peace was not just the absence of war. It was something that had to be protected and defended. Admiral Harrison now commanded the Galactic Defense Academy, teaching officers from 17 different species. "We did not teach you to fight because we wanted more violence in the galaxy," he told a new class. "We taught you because we learned something during our own violent history. Sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to make the cost of breaking it too high for aggressors to accept." A young Keplerian officer raised her hand. "Admiral, some people say humans brought war to a peaceful galaxy. What do you say to that?" Harrison looked at the faces of beings from across the galaxy, all now trained in tactics developed through humanity's long, bloody history. War was already here. The NIGMA Empire proved that. "We did not bring war to the galaxy. We brought the knowledge of how to win wars to species that had forgotten they might need to fight." "What happens now?" asked a Zorathi officer. "Now we make sure no species ever faces what the NIGMA Empire represented: conquest without mercy. Slavery disguised as improvement, the destruction of everything that makes a species unique. We make sure the strong cannot prey on the weak, simply because the weak chose peace over preparation." As the class ended, Harrison thought about the strange path that had brought humanity to this point. They had been warned about an unstoppable enemy by allies who expected them to die. Instead, they survived, fought back, and accidentally taught the galaxy something it had never known: that sometimes the best way to preserve peace is to be very good at war. That the NIGMA Empire was gone, but its lesson lived on. The galaxy would never again be defenseless against those who chose conquest over cooperation. Somewhere among the stars, other potential empires were learning that the galaxy had changed, and that the price of aggression had become much higher than anyone had imagined. Humanity had done more than save themselves. They had given the galaxy the tools to defend itself. The universe would never be the same.